Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the Feel Good Hour 91.3 FM stereo on this fantastic Friday evening. And tonight we are continuing the discussion with film and how things have influenced us. We grew up with film, we grew up with media, with television. How has that influenced the way we see the world? And today we thought we'd talk about relationships. Now, obviously, from an Islamic context, we're not talking about the relationships in the general sense that it's discussed today. The whole idea of finding someone and living together. We're talking about marriage. But we're talking about in the context of how we perceive marriage, how we perceive relationships, and where we got to the point where we think about the happily ever after, and even that phrase, happily ever after, how it exists in our psyche in this day and age. Joining me once again is, I would say, cinephile, Tashneem Abrams. Tashneem, assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shukran for having me.
It's a pleasure having you with us once again, ma'am. And I think tonight's discussion is going to be very interesting because we grew up with fairy tales. Disney played a huge role in our lives. I think, film and television. We all know the stories. We've seen the pictures, whether it's been, from Jungle Book to Cinderella. We all have been influenced by some aspect of Disney. We know the characters. We know the songs. I'm sure we can sing some of the songs,
Mm-hmm.
So what I wanted to touch on, as I've mentioned, is that idea of our perception of relationships and how we link that to film and media from a young age, and how it's also evolved over the years. And again, look, I think this is we are probably the most ideal generation to speak about this because we grew up with media, we grew up with television and VCRs in our homes, and we grew up with color film, we grew up with all of these different forms of media,
With a
and
lot
we
of
progressed.
privileges, basically.
Alhamdulillah, privileges, but also what I'm talking about is we are more surrounded and were more surrounded by this form of entertainment than any other generation before us. So we had more of an opportunity to be, for lack of a better word, forgive the pun, programmed or not. So that's what we're going to discuss. Were we programmed by media? So I wanted to start off with, like, for instance, just how media portrays and film and television portrays the issue of relationships to young children. And I want to start off with the most simplest of things.
You mean
And
with no issues?
Well, one of the things is, like, for instance, I've noticed now that I'm rewatching, old programs, maybe old cartoons that I used to watch before because it comes up on television, or I'm seeing it on streaming services, or it's a nostalgic little video that comes up at Facebook that you click on, right? And you start to see things with different eyes. You get a sense of the bigger picture, right? And I've begun to realize, like, cartoons and film more and more are focusing on the relationships between boys and girls at a very young age.
Very underage, yes.
Uh,
Yes, we can see this in all the Disney movies. Aladdin, Cinderella, Snow White.
yes,
There's the end game. The end game is always marriage.
yes. But not only that. Like, for instance, you'll find the program can be about a teddy bear, right, or crocodile, whatever, growing up in a little small town where all the animals are living together, and the teddy bear or whatever is like a 7-year-old teddy bear, going to primary school, and he meets this other new girl who's a rabbit who's just come into the town, and all of a sudden he kind of falls in love with this teddy bear, and he now feels that he wants to start engaging in the relationship. And I've noticed that element being portrayed. And I'm just using a weird example. I don't want to use any brand names because there are many out there, or point to specific series. But I've seen this trend, or a boy who is in primary school meets a girl, or vice versa, and all of a sudden there's desire to want to engage in a relationship. Now, some people are saying that that's actually activating that interest in the child before they even knew that it's something that should be there. Do you agree that
I
that
definitely
form of
agree.
media?
Yes, definitely agree without a doubt.
Yeah, because I mean, when I was like maybe 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, my whole thing of life was how can I have fun? How can I play? I wasn't thinking about how can I enter into a serious relationship and keep my partner happy. You understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, but I think it was different for us again. We were watching obviously different things, and we wanted to meet and want to love. Yeah, I don't know if it's different for females or what, but even me as a younger child, I mean, this is what we watched and this is what we were taught. At the end of the day, this is your goal in life, to meet your person, to meet your one, to get married. At least this is what Disney taught us.
Well, you see, the reason why I'm asking that question is, look, I think boys also because you notice girls at a younger age, right? Like 6, 7 years old, 8 years old, you notice girls at a younger age, and you find yourself thinking, well, I'd like to get to know that little girl as a little boy, but there's no context for how what the meaning of this and what the sense of this is. And from what I'm gathering from these things is that we were being activated at a young age. And I'm not going to lean into the conspiracy theories that people have around all of these different forms of media and what it's trying to do to children, but on the very practical level, it seems like very much, even if it was unintentional, the media industry was activating and sometimes sexualizing and conscientizing children to this element of a human being's life that didn't need to be present, activating a gene that didn't need to be present at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you agree then that from that point of view, it, in a sense, was I wouldn't say a negative experience, but it was something that might put kids of that era at a disadvantage?
I think you speaking also about that era like it's just stopped. I find that you still find it today. And it's even worse today because it's more available today. Back in our day, we didn't have the opportunity to watch cartoons constantly. There was a certain time where the TV was off, like literally off, the certain channels. But now,
Test pattern.
children can just sit in front of the TV all the time and consume, like you said last week. They can consume everything. I have a 3-year-old niece, and she was speaking to me about marriage. And I was like, where is she getting these ideas from? Marriage or boyfriends. It's like she's only 3 years old. So, where is she getting this idea? Is it something she's watching? Is it something she's seeing that everyone else has? So,
You're saying something very interesting because people tend to say, kids, they are so intelligent. They're so
they are.
intelligent. But is that intelligence in the sense of book knowledge? Is it intelligence in the sense of gathering a lot of information, or is it intelligence in the traditional sense tempered with wisdom? And I think it's more I think it's more intelligence in the sense of absorbing a lot of facts, right? So kids spit facts at you, but the decisions that they make, there's no wisdom, in that. And I find that, so when people say that kids are so intelligent these days and they know so much, it's because they've been exposed to so much.
They
And
have been
perhaps
exposed to much. Yes.
perhaps television is part of that. Like TikTok, to branch off at a tangent here, TikTok for me is something that it's so bizarre. You're flipping through these screens and you're seeing different kinds of media. One moment it's someone ballet dancing, the next moment it's someone who's witnessing a gruesome accident, and kids absorb that. Now imagine for us as adults looking at that, we put it into a certain context, but a child absorbs everything. They identify. They're trying to learn from everything, whether it be good or bad, and that becomes drawn into the experience.
I'm just thinking about the Squid Games that you were also speaking about, and
Yes.
you're speaking about them absorbing things. What about YouTube? YouTube is not filtered, and we have these kids who are playing these games, Squid Games. If I'm not mistaken, on school, I mean, certain schools sent out letters saying that the kids are playing these games, but where did they learn this from? It was obviously
Exactly.
YouTube, TikTok. So what you're saying does make a lot of sense, and I do agree that kids are absorbing, or they're being programmed. I don't want to say programmed, but kids are
It's
absorbing a lot
okay.
of
It's okay
information
if you want to
from
say
media.
programmed.
From media. And I just think it's our responsibility also to filter out what they do and don't see. Yeah.
But how is that possible? How do you filter out what they do and don't see? Because we talk about television, you can switch a television off, you can cut the plug, boom, there's no television. But today, everyone's got a phone, everyone's connected to the internet. You know, they're working on ways to get the toaster and the fridge connected to the internet as well. So, you know, you're going to get to a point where you can't run away from it. And,
But
and I don't know if you've noticed, but like, you know, kids are just gravitate towards anything with a screen on, you know. I'm sure if you've been at functions and the kids come up to you and say, "Oh, are the games on your phone?" You know, you must have experienced that. So
yes.
they'll find it wherever it is. So how do you then control that so that they make responsible choices?
I think by teaching them, you filter. But what I mean when I say filter is we watch them, whatever they're watching. We don't just allow them to sit in front of the screen and do something. We should actually guide them, or we should watch them while they're watching things, because we don't know what, especially YouTube. Sometimes YouTube, when kids watch things, they are watching and absorbing, and then these ads that are playing, right? So we have the responsibility to actually, obviously, kids are our responsibility. And I think when it comes to screen time, that should also be our responsibility for our children. Speaking like someone who has kids.
But I think also we're not just speaking from a certain. We're speaking from a perspective of having been kids ourselves, having been exposed to media, and I think also the sad thing is that technology is evolving so fast, but we're not being given the tools to deal with this. You know, to deal with the changing times.
But we are
No
given
one's.
better tools, I think, than our parents before this. Because I remember when I was a kid, I watched Aliens. That was not a film for a kid. Our parents didn't know that whatever we are absorbing, whatever we're watching or consuming, is going to have an effect on us.
But perhaps also the environment was different. Because look, we watched the most violent of films. Some of the Bruce Lee films, some of the Rambo films, were some of the most graphically violent stuff you could see and you can imagine. And yet, none of the kids in our classes decided, I'm going to test this out and see if it really looks like that in real life. Alhamdulillah, fortunately, But but the fact that en masse, it didn't look like we absorbed media. We didn't absorb the culture, I think, as much as people are today. Everything is about culture these days. Adopting a culture with, it's like if you read a certain class of books, you're adopting that culture, right? If you're part of the Twilight thing, it's Twilight culture. Lord of the Rings, part of the Lord of the Rings culture. There's an emo kid culture as well. There's this type of culture. There's all of these cultures nowadays, that exist
Speaking
in
about
the
the
space.
generalization of specific cliques.
Yes. Very much so. So there is that idea of everything becoming culture and these all becoming parts of ourselves, it's no longer just like I like movies, I like animation, I'm an anime person, I'm on anime groups, I have friends who are on anime, and we all love anime, and we subscribe to these websites, and we're waiting for the latest episodes to come out, and we download these and
Becomes a
share this
little
and all that.
obsession.
Yes, and we've got
But maybe that's also a way of people connecting with each other, having things in common.
Are you also an
Just
anime
maybe.
fan?
I used to be an anime fan, but we all go through
Okay.
different phases.
Look, I'm not saying it's bad or good. I'm just saying that perhaps to some degree, all of us, and I'm myself also have been influenced. But what I'm trying to understand is like where it starts. Basically, where does this thing come about? This culture, and why is it that today there's a cognitive dissonance, between reality and fantasy, and why we embrace fantasy so regularly? And again, coming back to our point of relationships, there's a cognitive dissonance, to the point where people will marry someone on the basis of an ideal and not the reality. So that's what I want to touch on when we come back, inshallah. And of course, we're talking to Tasneem Abrams. We're speaking about the whole idea around media, television, and film, how it's influenced us over the years. Our headline today is relationships, and the choices we make, has that also been influenced by media, by television, by film? Let us know. Send us a WhatsApp 0829913913. We'll be back right after this. Okay. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Feel Good Hour with myself, Mohammed Fasih Peterson, conversation with Tasneem Abrams this evening, and we're talking about film. Before the break, we spoke about the whole idea around, we touched on anime as well, but we spoke about cultures, and subcultures. And we kind of driving back to the point now of what, how media has influenced our concepts and our ideas of relationships. Now, we spoke earlier about when you are very, very young and you get activated to the idea of the opposite sex in the form of girlfriend and boyfriend. Now, before we move further on, what I find so distressing is that you find adults asking a young girl or a young boy, don't you have a girlfriend? Or don't you have a boyfriend yet? That happens
It's so
in our community.
inappropriate.
It's so inappropriate. And it makes that child, do you think it makes that child feel inadequate? If I
Yes,
don't
it
have
does.
a partner, then I am not a complete person. And so, as much as the media or the film and television aspect of it creates this idea that, I need to have a partner, don't you think that also creates a sense of inadequacy then that drives that young person to wanting to pursue relationships so they can feel
Yes,
at the
because
time
they're
when
obviously, yeah, sorry, I'm listening.
at a time when their emotions are being formed, the whole identity is being formed, they're being programmed, and I'm going to use that word again, forgive the pun, as a way, they're being programmed and being told what to think.
Yes, I agree with you. And before we touch on that, and I know we're not supposed to get into the psychology of anything, but I also find within our culture, like I'll just drive this in, but I mean, that's a boundary. Telling a 3-year-old child, don't you have a girlfriend or boyfriend? That is overstepping a boundary. You don't speak about specific topics to a kid. You don't, it's inappropriate in general. Yeah, Malfasih, what were you saying?
Well,
You can delete
I think
that.
not a problem. But I want to keep that because I think it's really important. There is this sense of inappropriateness with some adults and children, and perhaps it's
Yeah, but that is
because
also, we've normalized it, or they've
Yes.
normalized it back in the day, But I think today we can obviously say, you don't say that to a child. Maybe this is why we were also, I'm not putting blame on anyone, but this is also the reason why we, as young kids, this is what we were looking forward to. True love, or true romance, the one soulmate, this ideal idea of what things are supposed to be like because of what movies taught us and because of what adults were telling us was supposed to happen, I guess.
When you say that also, here's another story, Aladdin, right? And we know that old song, A Whole New World, Basically, I can show you the world, shining, shivering splendor, and painting this fantastic picture in the mind of the person of what I'm going to be able to give you, if you accept me into your life, right? It's such a huge promise to make and such huge claims to put out there. And perhaps is that sometimes why both males and females, as they grow up, they have these massive expectations because they were taught, kind of subconsciously, that you can get the world, shining and shimmering, splendid, so beautiful. You can get this in a relationship, and that sometimes when people don't get that, and when they end up having to pay the bills, and they end up having to foot the 80,000 rand wedding that they bought on credit, afterwards, and things aren't so rosy, that people sometimes fall into depression as a result of that.
Or they just give up on their relationship or marriage.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
I think that so music also plays a role. We're saying film, but music also plays a role, because you can count. I think
What about books?
books too. Look,
Yeah.
I didn't want to touch books because I love books, but
Books as
but I
well.
think yeah, books are like films for the brain. Like because your imagination fills in the gaps. Your imagination like the actual film, but you're like yes, but
I find that anything that gives us this idea of perfection, and this is found, like we find this a lot in media and in, like you said, books, film, they give us this idea of something ideal, and then we look forward to that, and sometimes we forget that if we want something, we actually have to build to get to a point to have it. And even when we get to that point, that doesn't mean we're going to have everything, because yet again we have to work on certain things, and I think we forget this a lot of the times. And I'm not only speaking about romantic relationships, I'm speaking about relationships in general. I mean, yeah, we're supposed to nurture relationships. It's not just you get married and it's happily ever after. That's a childhood fantasy. This is something yet again film and media has taught us. And I think,
yeah, please continue.
I don't know, I'm still listening to you, sorry.
So I think what you said there kind of it creates a cycle where we've come back again to childhood and childhood expectations. Now a child doesn't have expectations and accept what he or she is taught. Like if you say to a child on Sunday you're going to get chocolate mousse, you've created the expectation. So every Sunday that child's going to look forward to chocolate mousse. And sometimes people grow up, they're married, they're 50 years old, but they still look forward to their chocolate mousse on the Sunday because it's an expectation that's been created. It's something that is familiar, and we love the familiar as human beings.
This is just making me think now. Using the term childhood expectations, whereas I would use childhood fantasy, because at the end, not at the end of the day, but I mean, we grew up and we learned that is not how life works. Well, obviously, we know this is the ideal. So what is the difference between us and other people, still clinging onto that idea of idealism or that childhood fantasy? Because it's not an expectation at the end of the day, it's a fantasy.
So don't you think that's why we are in, as a society, why people are in pain today? That people are suffering largely because of the fantasies and the expectations created on the basis of
film and media.
What media? Because that's the only the reference or experience. Like when you talk about love, right? What do you think about? You think about a movie you watched. What is the example of true love? In all its facets, right? And some people might say, well, in a household, that should be the ideal form of love, but film and television makes it so much prettier, right? Because parents have to go through real things. They have to go through arguments. They have to raise kids together. They've got to
pick up the towel in the toilet.
Yes. They've got to pick up the towel in the toilet and
pick it up.
Exactly. So
I think it's
see
the
the parents.
little things that we forget. We forget the little things at the end of the day. When we do get married, we forget, or we don't think about, I don't know, who's going to do the dishes? Are you okay with doing the dishes? How do you work with someone who's lazy or selfish? Are you okay with that person being lazy or selfish? Are you okay with, yet again, picking up the towel or not, or just leaving it? Where do you find the balance also? In an ideal world, there's always happily ever after, and we don't get to see what happens after that happily ever after. They never show us this. It's rare.
And the thing is that the funny thing is that when you say happily ever after, it could actually be true, but happiness requires some sadness. It requires some conflict, right?
Yeah.
It requires some ups and downs, but that's never explained. And so our idea of happily ever after is that people play nice together for the rest of their lives, you know? There's no hint of the mother-in-law and the father-in-law and the sisters-in-laws and the brothers-in-laws. There are no ups and downs, there are no other challenges, no existential crises. There's just this happily ever after thing. And so I think that when people say happily ever after, on the surface, people say, well, but you know, they said happily ever after, they lived happily. It doesn't necessarily mean, but because it's not explained, we look at it as being perfect, as life being perfect. The prince is always going to
no
be
such
so
thing
welcoming.
as perfect.
Of course, I mean, even people get married, and on the day of the wedding, the bride stains a dress, right, while she's eating curry and rice, or I don't know, tandoori chicken, whatever's on the menu. She stains a dress, or the cars, the bridal car gets a flat. These are teaching us that life isn't supposed to be perfect. You know, life's supposed to have challenges.
And there's supposed to be conflict in order for us to grow.
Exactly. Growing pains, as they say, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So coming back to, so we've looked at like the influence that not only media but also society and the expectations or the things that our children have on their psyche at a young age. So let's say we move a little bit further, right? And we start looking at, okay, let's look at at the novels. Let's look at the soaps, because in the 90s, soaps was very big, right? Beverly Hills 90210 was one of those. Melrose Place. These were all names that were thrown out there, you know, early on, and obviously the
Hey, that is not a
Bolts
soapy.
and the
That is
Days.
a series, okay?
Yeah,
A soapy is Days of Our Lives. Bold and the Beautiful.
that same stuff, just a younger crowd. So you know, there's this whole kind of there is again this expectation of love and undying love and finding the way back to each other, and it sounds so beautiful. And now you're at the stage of either becoming or are now a teenager, right? So now that desire is there you're becoming aware of the opposite sex. And that desire is there to want to get into a relationship. And as Muslims, we understand that, you know, Islam teaches us not permissible to have a relationship before marriage. It's not permissible to engage in a relationship before marriage. So we're making that clear. We're not endorsing this. But we're saying that there's this desire to want to, you know, at least get married, or basically that desire is there. So now, fueled by these types of things. So, like for instance, the Beverly Hills 90210s and all those types of shows showed the ideal life to people, or what they thought was ideal. A beautiful girl, handsome guy, and this ideal life that they could have on high school. You know? This romance they could have in high school that would blossom and grow.
Now also, what about Twilight? No, you're speaking about series. What about...
Please don't talk about... Please don't speak about sparkly vampires, please.
No, but that's... I mean, teenagers. This is also... You know, what about Riverdale? That's...
But don't you see this is... Don't you think this is an industry? Teenage romance is an industry. You know, the term of teen romance has been coined, and it's been packaged as, we're going to sell this to young girls. We're going to find the most handsome guy you can think of and the most beautiful girl and put them in a situation together.
Playing a 16-year-old child.
True, eh? And put the two of them together, and we'll craft this whole story of strife and conflict and all of these things. And then at the end of this, there's going to be a happily ever after, right? And so...
I mean, the drama of it all.
Of course, the drama.
I don't know if can we speak about film on here?
You can allude to it, yeah.
Oh, allude. So I can't use specific series names or movies names.
Okay, use them.
Okay.
We'll,
So, or the book. I don't know if you've watched You. It's a
I've heard about you.
series.
I've heard about you. It's
It's
a very sick
so
series.
good. It's not sick. I find it fascinating, and I find it incredible because what it does is there's a serial killer, right? He's a serial killer. This guy, the
Very
main guy, the
romantic.
protagonist. Yeah.
Very
But
romantic.
what this series does is it takes all these Hollywood tropes, right? Falling in love, all the narrations, the narratives of how you're supposed to fall in love, the drama behind it all, what keeps these two people separated and then brings them together. They take all of that and they just turn it around because this is a serial killer. And he's creating these narratives and he's creating these situations or environments in order to basically commit murder at the end of the day because he's a serial killer. So what they do is they put us in his mind, he's narrating. So we are yet again, it's a serial killer. So we are on his side, but also not on his side. You just froze. Are you still there?
I am
Oh,
still
you
here.
just froze again. Oh,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, the reason why I like that series so much is because of the tropes within the series. So they take all these ideas of Hollywood, the romantic ideas they have, and they just twist it completely. So we actually get to see what nonsense it actually is. This ideal idea of what romantic or romanticism is actually about, what they think it's about, this idealism. Yeah, and he turns it into horror. You should give it a watch.
I I, I, I probably should. But I'm thinking
Or
it's
read the
more of
book.
like Dexter, but his romance.
Well, kind of, but not. I mean, a lot of people obviously love Dexter more, but the reason why, like I said, I like you so much is because it just this Hollywood idea of, and this is what Hollywood feeds us. They feed us this idealism, this fantasy of what love is supposed. You're supposed to be in love with the person. You're not supposed to feel. I don't even know what before. Oh my god, I sound like I sound like I don't believe in love or whatever. But yeah, this idea of what love is supposed to be like, or what Hollywood has been feeding us, and they just, yeah, like I said, they twist it around and they make us see the reality of it all instead of seeing this ideal version of what we've been fed all our lives through media and film.
I think also there's this idea of making love into something that it potentially is not, right? Because if you speak to like really elderly couples who've been together for years, people always ask them, "What's the secret? You've been together for such a long time. What's the secret?" And they begin to tell you that it's not the idea of romantic love that we think about. That's infatuation, because
It is
that's not going to
infatuation.
keep you. That's not going to keep you at someone's side when they're going through trouble and when they're going through
Yep,
difficulty.
I agree.
It's that kind of love of of the familiarity of growing together and overcoming struggles and that strength and that bond. That's the true love, right? It's not pretty, you know.
We just went through a pandemic also, being stuck in a house with someone for a year. Do you really want to be infatuated with someone? And you just lose the infatuation and be
Yeah.
stuck with this person for almost 2 years in a house?
Can you imagine how it must have tested newlyweds,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Uh, March, April hit, and you maybe just got married just before the lockdown, right? And now
Mm,
you kind of shacked up with you're now living with your husband or your wife, newly married. Pandemic hits, and you can't go anywhere, and people stop shaving, and people stop doing the things they normally do, and it's potato chips every single day, and Netflix just to pass the time, and all these other things, and you can imagine, like, I mean, that must have been the most extreme example because you're spending 24 hours a day with that person, which is it's not normal, You're supposed to go to work, you're supposed to
mm,
be able to kind of reset, and you're not supposed to be spending every single day, 24 hours a day,
But I mean, that could have also made us think, like, I know I was sitting and thinking, oh my God, what did I then want from someone in a situation like this? And for me, what would be more rewarding is actually having a proper conversation with someone, or actually sitting in comfortable silence, talking to someone, properly speaking, having a conversation.
I think silence is so underrated. And I'm not just talking about
Yes.
relationships in the sense of romantic relationships, but I mean in general. And I know we
Yeah.
get a little bit of topic here, but
Comfortable silence.
comfortable silence, but kind of being able to, sit and have a cup of tea and not have to entertain, just be
Yes.
yourself. Just like sip the tea, not slip, sip the tea and just kind of be in nature, or be, in a place where you can feel comfortable. You're not being judged. You can just be quiet. Because life today is all about trying to be the funniest, trying to be the most, have the snappiest comment, constantly trying to entertain. I think as much as we are entertained, we want to entertain. I don't know, this bizarre thing. We no longer sitting on the stoop and just staring, into the distance with
To nothing.
into nothing. Yeah, we want to constantly be entertaining people on every level, and I guess I might have to. We have to speak to professionals about this, but I think that probably also is because of a deficiency that we crave to be the entertainment. If we're not the entertainment, if we're not drawing attention, then we're not valuable in that space. I'm not gonna make a call on that, but I'm just thinking, it's something that we have to ask someone who knows a little bit more. But it seems definitely to be kind of the case. But again, coming back to this whole idea of glistening vampires, and all of those things that we spoke about, like the whole Twilight Saga and all of those things. So this is what young people are now being bombarded with, and it's like, this is the type of beauty you should be striving to be, or that you should strive to chase. There's no dynamicism to any of these characters. There's no aspect of character. What type of character is the person?
You stole it from me.
Okay,
Yeah.
you can elaborate on that.
It's about character. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is what we forget. We forget that, yet again, I'm not a professional. I'm literally just speaking from experience. But that's what we forget about at the end of the day. We forget about the fact that what's more important is character. I've seen a lot of friends, meet people. I've seen a lot of friends separate. I've seen people going through things. Me also, obviously. But I mean, at the end of the day, that is what matters the most. Character, nurturing a relationship, mutual understanding. I had this one friend, and I'd never forget what he told me. It still sticks with me. He was speaking about, he was married before. He got separated. He met someone, alhamdulillah. They're still married. He's very happy. But he told me, looks don't matter at the end of the day. Because if a person is a crappy person, that's it. So what he did was he stopped looking at the physical attributes of someone, because he found out it wasn't helping. So what he did was he looked more or deeper. He looked at character. And alhamdulillah, he found someone with amazing character. They have a child together. They're happy. But I think this is it. Like, I think you also fall for that whole idea of, and a lot of us do, we fall for this idea of, the picture perfect relationship, what we're told we're supposed to have from television, what we're told we're supposed to have from books, from all this media, from film. Most of my friends actually who I speak with, they tell me they go for people they aren't actually attracted to at first, because they realize the people that they are attracted to are the ones that are basically toxic for them. So that also makes me wonder, are they now going for character or personality, or I don't know. They're just questions. Oh.
Well, I think on that point, again, that's where film and television move us in the opposite direction, because every character you see is gorgeous, right? Every female character is gorgeous. Every male character is handsome, and
we all gorgeous.
Thanks for the for giving all of us the confidence, please. Alhamdulillah. So what I'm saying is that there's this thing about you see a waitress in a shop, as a waitress in I don't know what the waitress will be doing in the shop, but a waitress in a diner or whatever, and this woman looks like a model, right? Being portrayed on television. She looks like someone who could walk into a modeling agency and get a job any moment. We see the most attractive characters in the most menial jobs, right? And so in our mind, it's like this is the standard. Beauty is the standard. It to the point where it makes people feel less themselves. And someone actually told me once, a friend of mine said to me that there's this whole thing happening now within this in our community where people are becoming obsessed with Bollywood to the point where they want to look like the Bollywood girls. They wanna they resemble these actresses, and so it means people feel inadequate about their hair. They feel inadequate about their complexion. They're trying to change themselves to
Yeah,
appear, and I think that's actually damaging to the self-image as well,
it
because now you're
is.
making comparisons. So similarly, I think with these types of things, you make comparisons between yourself and that character, and where you don't feel you measure up, you kind of beat yourself up about it.
You beat yourself up about it and you have these insecurities based on what you've seen or the fiction. It's obviously not reality. Touching on that, you just spoke about something about when they are focusing. There's this trope. These two things. There's something called the male gaze and the female gaze. So when they're speaking about the male gaze when it comes to film, when the camera is up
We're talking about the
close,
smolder, like the rock smolder.
you kind of, but the male gaze is more focusing on females. So when the camera is on a female's body parts, that's the male gaze.
Mm, mm.
So someone was speaking about, what about the female gaze? Do we also look or objectify men the way men obviously objectify females? And then someone was saying, not someone, um it's like research that they've done, that the female gaze is more to do with intimacy compared to the male gaze, where it's more to do with objectifying the female. So the female gaze is more about, focusing the camera on someone's eyes, focusing it on someone's face, to see the expression, you know. But yeah, I thought that this also plays a role within TV and film, because you get the men who obviously are more interested in someone's body, whereas you get the female who will be more interested in the emotional capacity of the male. And I think this is also an influence of media at the end of the day. Those gazes, the camera angles, what they're actually forcing us to watch.
But most definitely, because you watch a movie, and whether you like it or not, whether you are there for it or not, as a viewer, when they're trying to portray how attractive a woman is, they will scan down her body basically,
Yes,
and they will
male gaze.
portray. Yes, that's the male gaze, as you're saying,
Mm,
and for when it comes to a man, the camera doesn't do that, right? The camera doesn't pan up the man from his grasshoppers. It's basically
mhm.
it looks at the man as no, in a way, like you said, look at his eyes or look at his face, but
Hands
and hands
can be
maybe, but
anything.
but don't you think that that also speaks to how strange society is, that even this industry, television and film as well, um, have in a sense objectified women, even in an industry that today is fighting to change these tropes and stereotypes,
Mm.
but in some way they're still upholding it.
Yes, I do. I agree with you completely. And this is also what scares me when it comes to film and media with Muslim representation, because what they're trying to do now is add more Muslims in film. And when are they going? I don't know how to phrase this, but I mean, in film, the only Muslim that's accepted is the secular Muslim. No other Muslim is accepted. I don't know if anyone else has noted this, but this has always bothered me. About, I know we are going off topic, but yeah, the Muslim representation within film is so narrow-minded. You know, even in series, it's so narrow-minded. I fear us being represented in the future in films and movies. Um, yeah, I forgot what we're speaking about. See.
Well, actually, it's even if we stop right there, there's enough to actually kind of make a meal of if we just examine this point, because I know Marvel's trying to integrate Muslim characters, but they follow, as you mentioned, a very secular line. They can,
It
can
is.
you can't have a superhero wearing a scarf. It's a crime in the Western world for a superhero to wear hijab, right? You must be able to see a body because uh, the animators, the people actually
Mm,
drawing these images for new characters, objectify the character, right?
they do.
And they will put her in the most skimpiest of clothes. The same way, man will be bulked up, but the woman will be in the most skimpiest of clothes. And for some reason, you can only save the world in your underpants. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
why that is, but um, superheroes are always in the underpants. They always look like they're getting ready for bed. They're going to have a nap rather than they're getting.
Yep.
I think that's the one problem. And so what they've done is um, even I remember I flipped through Facebook and I was just looking at the videos and I came across this little short film, and it was about these two women. The one is in full hijab, and the other one is a what they would call a liberated Muslim. They both come from Muslim households, but
Oh,
the
I
one
hate that
is
term. Oh, I
yes,
hate that term so much.
the one comes from a home where she's wearing niqab basically, and the other
Mm-hmm.
one is completely Western in the dress and in approach to life, and it's almost as if the woman in niqab is living a lesser life, and it's always being portrayed as that she's not a whole human being. She's suffering.
Mm.
She's oppressed. She cannot be living this ideal life. Uh, and the woman who is not wearing hijab and is living this Western lifestyle in its totality, she's experiencing life and she's getting the best out of life. And you could really see when I like to check the comments on these videos because it gives you a gauge of how people think. And there was one comment where someone was saying, this is completely the wrong representation of what the reality is. Um, and I'm waiting for the day when people actually start writing films about Muslims from their perspective, really from their perspective, and not partly what the producer thinks and partly what the director thinks. You know,
And
uh,
what people are writing, that's also important. I
exactly.
mean, what people are writing our stories as Muslims, it frustrates me. I don't know if you've heard the series Rami. So I watched season one. I enjoyed
Yes,
it.
yes.
Yeah, it's a Muslim guy, Egyptian.
Planning to get married.
Lived in Yes. I watched season one. I enjoyed it. Season two, on the other hand, I disliked it immensely because I think he lost his voice when it came to his characters within the series.
Mm,
So I just stopped watching it completely. But even then, they in like the series started off good because there was a representation in a way of Muslims, proper Muslims. And then in season two, when it changed the arcs of the characters so greatly, I mean, it affected me so much that I just stopped watching because I don't even know why he did what he did. But I mean, yet again, is that his voice speaking, or was that the producers or the directors or whoever is responsible for the series is their voice? So our voices always get lost as Muslims. We're going off topic again, eh?
no, very much so. But I think these are all important discussions because, again, everything that we've spoken about that's happening in film, children are not just watching Disney movies. They're seeing these things as well. So
It's not
they
only
are.
children, it's us as adults as well.
It's us
I
as
mean,
adults also being programmed.
seriously, like,
we're,
yeah.
we're, we're all being programmed constantly. I've forgotten to say, I'm bad at saying, excuse the pun, because that's what we are, as much programmed by the programming that we're watching as anything else. So I think that those are important points to make, and it leads into where we are, like in terms of speaking about teenagers, right? Because as a young person, people are finding their identity. And when we say finding their identity, finding out what your interests are, right? You know who you are. You know you're born into. As Muslims, we know what is expected of us as within the Deen. What we're talking about is, what are your interests? What are the things you're passionate about? And somehow these things make us question these films. And I don't know if you can agree with me or you can disagree with me, but I feel that these films make us question who we are inside, right? And who we need to be. That character is very outgoing and very outspoken. I need to be like that, even if naturally I'm introverted, and it's not a problem,
Definitely.
But
yet again, we find this even in like comic books, for example. Back in the day when I read comic books, all I wanted to be was Lois Lane. So we find it everywhere. It's because we have this I don't want to say crisis, but when we're younger, we don't know ourselves. So what we do is we imitate other people. We imitate characters, to find out, okay, is this something I like? We just touch the, does it touch the water?
Touch the surface, or skim the surface, basically.
Skim the surface, yeah, that's what we do. We're just trying to find out. Yeah, so I think it's, like you said, but I guess comic books falls under media as well. Anything that shapes us or that gives us an idea. I mean, even art, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Art even, what I'm basically saying is there are so many other things that influence us and shape who we are. But the biggest ones is definitely film and media. That's without a doubt. Yeah.
So Tashaneem Abrams, I think we've come to the end of this session. I think there's still so much that I'd like to cover on this, because relationships are something that ultimately has a huge impact on us. And so kind of the decisions we make in life and what influences us to make those decisions can dictate the trajectory of our lives, and the things that ultimately become important to us later on. And so I'd like to spend a little bit more time with us, inshallah, in the future program. But I want to say shukran for joining me this evening on the Feel Good Hour. And thanks for your insights. Shukran so much, and stay safe, ma'am.
Shukran for having me. Wa alaikum salam.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, okay, I'm ending this broadcast now.